Okay, here we
Morning,
go.
Dave.
Hi, Annika. How are you?
I'm so good.
Sorry. Sounds like something we need to talk about later. Anyway,
Yeah, yes. Not on a recording though.
yeah.
Hey, this is episode 12 of What in God's Name is Going On. Did you know that?
Episode 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, and fun. We,
It
we have
is
a lot
fun.
to go, I think.
We actually do have a lot of fun doing these episodes, don't we?
Yep, we do.
Yeah. Well, here we are, episode 12. We have been talking about identity underneath this bigger theme of what in God's name is going on. Because what in God's name is going on has a lot to do with who we are in Christ and our identity. So we've been drilling down into some concepts that you've been blowing our mind about. And today is another one of those. We're going to be talking about identity. In the last episode that you and I did together, which was episode 11, we talked about how big would the yes need to be if you've heard no your whole life? How big would
Right.
the yes need to be if you've heard no your whole life?
Yeah, and the
If
full
you
thing
heard,
was to do the effect. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, to undo the effect of being
Right.
told no your whole life. And maybe you've been told no around your gender or your race or your background or the way you look, or who knows. The list is so long of the ways that we've been told no, and they're different for everybody. And maybe these words, although they are just words, right? The things and the labels that we give ourselves, the race, our gender, our background, they're just words. But words, according to Jesus, have an incredible effect on who we are because he did, after all, use words to put things into motion to create the universe.
Mhm.
And words, according to you, Dave, have a very powerful effect on who we are and who we become and what we do and what we don't do.
And why are we doing that?
Right? So we're going to stop here because you have some things that you want to say, particularly about words and the
Yep.
effect that words have on us and who we are. So I'm going to pass it to you
Yeah.
here. You're going to jump in. Let's do this.
I'm jumping in. I'm jumping in. Well, part of the significance is that I kind of wanted to skip over this. It didn't feel big enough. But the more I thought of it and the more I worked on stuff I've already taught before, it seemed to get bigger and bigger. I can just throw this out there relative to how significant it is. Proverbs 18:21 says that life and death is in the power of the tongue. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. So yes, I think we're onto something, and I think it's a big thing. I think the surprise might be how it moves into our sense of identity at times. James 3, the whole chapter in James 3 is almost entirely about the power of the tongue to do a number of things. One, to set the course of a life, not to determine a life, but it can set the course of a life. The power of the tongue, chapter 3, still in James, to bless and to curse, and even to affect our sense of identity. But James' whole point in chapter 3 was and the power of the analogy was that something so tiny. In fact, I was struggling with whether to talk about this because words, it's just words. His whole point was that something so tiny like a tongue, like a tiny little tongue, small part of the body, has such a big effect. And then his analogy is in verse 3 of chapter 3, like a bit in a horse's mouth, or the rudder of a mighty ship. The tongue, though tiny, has a disproportionate effect. I mean, think that something that small wouldn't have that big of an effect on a very large body. It has an incredible capacity to influence and direct a life, to build up a human soul, to tear it down. In fact, in verse 5, he says this: see how great a forest fire is set aflame by a tiny spark. Again, the analogy, something really small, did a whole lot of damage. It was just a little spark. It was just a word. Who cares? Well, that matters. There's a thing going on in here. And James is kind of tapped into it. So also the tongue, he's comparing it to the spark, though it's small, it's a small part of the body. You got to boast great things. I'm in verse 5 still. It can burn things down. It can damage the soul, and the damage is for real. Morgan Blake wrote an article a long time ago. It was more of a poem about this in the Atlantic Monthly. Said this: I'm more deadly than the screaming shell of a howitzer. I can win without killing. I can tear down homes and wreck lives. I travel on the wings of the wind. No innocence is strong enough to stop me. No purity can daunt me. I'll just blow right by your actual purity and tell lies about you. No innocence is strong enough to stop me. No purity can daunt me. I have no respect for justice, no mercy for the defenseless. My victims are numerous as the sands of the sea, and often as innocent. I never forget. I seldom forgive. My name is slander and gossip, half-truths and innuendo, just words, right? The kind that, however, can end a relationship, destroy a marriage, split a church, start a riot. So marvel with me, says James, at the power of a word to, like a spark, burn down a forest. Irresponsible rhetoric. We hear a lot about that in the political arena, but also in the religious arena. Oh, it's just a word. No. This is a powerful thing. It's a big thing, dog whistle language, religious stuff as well. Hurtful words. Let's get down more personal. Hurtful words that are personally designed to wound. Just words. Come on, get over it, right? But it brings up this memory, and some of you who've gone to Open Door may remember the story because I've told it before, and it's weird that I remember it because I couldn't have been more than 6. I'm a 70-year-old man. I'm talking about something I vividly remember when I was 6. The details of this thing are vague. I think it happened at recess. The exact words spoken to me are long forgotten. I don't know what those words were, but the feelings of them remain, and I still remember someone called me a name. No, well, they did. And I'm 6, and so I've got the 6-year-old capacity to deal with that. And so, you know, you give some grace there and understanding, but you get called lots of names. So if you're a 6-year-old, even you're saying to yourself, you know, blow it off, but you get called lots of names when you're 16 too, and even when you're 60. But the ones, the words you get called, the things that are said to you and me, that make your knees weak and chin quiver. And, you know, it's weird because I don't know if growing up is a good thing entirely, because when I was 6, there were words that could be spoken to me that would make my knees weak. I mean, chin quiver. I don't know what that would be now. I don't know. Yeah, I'm more guarded now. This is why the 6-year-old analogy is so good. Totally unguarded. So those things, those arrows can get right in. The ones that make your knees weak and chin quiver are the ones that came from someone you cared about, whose opinion mattered to you. Maybe they shouldn't have because they're an idiot, but it mattered to you what they thought of you. It was someone who you hoped would like you, who you hoped would be nice to you. Maybe they would even protect you and defend you. But what they said out loud, like in front of everyone, the whole wide world, was actually something that you suspected might be true of you, of me. But you hoped that because maybe they would be your friend, they wouldn't notice, or if they noticed, they wouldn't care. That you know, your nose was too big, or your legs were too skinny, your hair was too something, or that you were too fat or too skinny or too slow, or that you just were such a loser, and you kind of felt like that anyway. And you just hoped it didn't matter to them because they would be your friend, but then they said it out loud, and boom, there it is. And the advice we got back in those days, at least that I got, was this: just remember, sticks and stones. Remember this one? Can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But what if they do? And what if the words are coming? What if they're coming and they're about your identity and your value and your worth from someone a little more significant than another 6-year-old kid on the playground? What if it was your father, and what if it was continually your father telling you what you were worth, and it wasn't much, or your mother, or your big brother, or a sister, favorite teacher, in front of everyone. What an idiot you are, or favorite coach, or the type. I'm talking about a type of person, someone from whom you had secretly longed for a word. You would have never said, I need a word. In your soul, you secretly longed for a word from this person that would maybe somehow tell you who you were. And tell you what you're worth, because you're not sure, okay, for a long time, actually, and tell you a word. And that's why these words coming often, it's not the 6-year-old on the playground that has the power to do this. It's usually someone older who has that power, king or queen kind of, mother, father kind of power to speak to you, that they'll tell you what you're worth and where you fit and whether you fit anywhere. Someone who you hoped secretly would help you find your way in a very confusing world. Funny thing about that sticks and stones thing, I don't remember ever when I was 6 or 60 using those words to defend myself or protect myself or try to heal myself. Sticks and stones, they make time better now. Because while sticks and stones can break your bones, words pierce the heart. Again, that's why the 6-year-old thing is so good, because it's so unguarded, and it just makes me angry when I think of our 6-year-old kids. And anyway, such an unguardedness about that. Words can pierce the heart, they can wound the soul, and words become embedded. Been talking about that for a couple of episodes, because words, like water running down a hill, will find a groove, and the longer they stay in that groove undisturbed, they become embedded. This really is who you are. You are a grasshopper. Remember that? People crossing the Jordan River, spies came back, were like grasshoppers in our own sight. It got embedded. That was who they thought they were. This is about identity. See, if you break a bone with stone, it hurts. It hurts. You cry, but you go to a doctor, they set the bone, they cast it, they medicate it, and you're back. In a few weeks, you're back playing, back in the game. But what do you do if what got wounded was your soul? If what got broken was your heart? And what if the person who wounded your soul or your heart did it with a word? Come on, you pray. How do you show people where it hurts? And how do you explain to them why it hurts and it still hurts? After like 25 years, you still feel stupid and small and insignificant, and you still feel like a grasshopper. And certain things trigger it along the way because you think you got over it. It got embedded some way. Yeah, I remember I told a story in one of the earlier episodes about this pastor friend of mine in Ohio who incredibly gifted, but he never got a well done from his father. And his perception of himself was that most of what drove him in his ministry was trying to get what he was never going to get. And so he felt like of himself that he was never enough. That's who he was, never enough. And if it feels extreme, what I'm saying here, like get over it. It was just a word. I get that. Dial it down to marveling at the power of a word, not to break your heart, but and this is getting back to James, marvel at the power of a word to just nudge you in a direction. And this is both discouraging and encouraging, because as we choose our words when we're dealing with, I think, the next generation, even because these words, I'm going to say, good job. It's not changing their life. It might give them a nudge. Yeah, it might give them a nudge, and the other might give them a nudge the other way. It sets in motion a direction, a course in both positive and negative ways. Back to James 3, the two analogies in verses 3 and 4 were a bit in a horse's mouth and the rudder of a ship. Verse 3 says this: if we put a bit in a horse's mouth, they obey us. So I have control over this massive animal, and we direct the entire body with this tiny little bit. Verse 4, same with ships, though they are great and driven by strong winds, they are still directed by a very small rudder. Very strange. It's great. And these metaphors are incredible. James is good at this. These Bible guys, anyway. And then the obvious point there, again, I think I've already made it, is that something comparatively small, like a bit compared to a horse, really small compared to a horse, a rudder compared to a ship, a tongue little word compared to a human life has a disproportionate almost influence on direction, on something, on the direction of something that's very large, something small, disproportionate effect on the direction of something very large, like a horse, a ship, a human life. By the way, in James 3, never studied whether this is all connected, but it occurred to me when I was doing this, that in James 3, James warns us, saying, don't all of you become teachers, because teachers in a place of authority and you can use your words, and there's a greater judgment on you. So be careful about becoming a teacher. And I think the biggest thing there is because James knew words have an effect. They have an effect. People might actually follow you. They might actually believe what you say. So be careful about being in that kind of position. Now, illustration to this influence of a rudder on a ship. I'm not a sailor, so I Googled it. I'm an expert. But the ship analogy is actually fascinating if you do get into it, because just looking at a massive ship, I would have thought that the biggest influence on where that ship goes, this is an ancient ship with sails and stuff, that the biggest influence would be the wind. But any sailor knows, most sailors know, that by setting the sails and the rudder in a certain way, they can make progress into the wind. It's not just the wind that has the influence. You can go right into the wind if you know how to set the sail and use the rudder. So also the tongue, verse 5, has more influence on the direction of someone's life than difficult circumstances alone. They got really hard circumstances. Well, they're kind of screwed. Well, you got something to deal with, but the biggest influence is not the difficult circumstances. And see, normally I just would have thought, looking at human life, that the biggest influence on the direction of someone's life would be strong winds, difficult circumstances. James says, well, they do have an effect, but difficult circumstances are not the biggest influence. He says, no, that's not true. Indeed, you give me someone, this is my synopsis of these analogies, you give me someone with difficult circumstances, lots of wind. You probably think of people like this, but you fill their heart. What's that?
I'm thinking about people.
But you take those people with those difficult circumstances and you fill their mind and heart with truth about who God is, and how he loves, and truth about life and how it actually works, and love and what it actually looks like, about God and who he is, and about who they are. Fill their minds with the truth about who God says they are and how much they're worth. And you might actually watch that person make some progress in life and do it right into the wind. That'll preach right there.
Yeah.
But they're just words. They're just words. See little words on the playground that break your heart. Well, they're just words. Get over it. But these other words, too positive, that identify and what the truth of God is and who we actually are in Christ, have an effect. Simple words. Often, by the way, these aren't, parents sometimes think we need to sit down and have a talk. These words are often spoken along the way. That's when you notice something. And don't make stuff up. When you notice it comes offhandedly, I think you can do that. You're good at that. I believe in you. And saying those things aren't magic wands, but they can nudge a kid. They can nudge something. They move people in a direction. Negative words have the same effect. You're such a loser. We've already kind of covered this. You'll never amount. Don't bother trying. And guess what? So they don't even try. Now, those negative words didn't determine destiny, but it moved them in a direction, gave them a nudge in that direction. It's a direction that can be overcome, but it's the power words is the whole point here. For some, the insatiable desire they have and drive they have to succeed is usually seen as a great thing. But sometimes that insatiable desire to succeed is set into motion with a word, sometimes a positive word. I think you can. Okay, but often it's a negative word. So the insatiable desire that some people have to succeed is really an insatiable drive to silence the words that say you can't, that you're never enough. an insatiable desire to silence the voices, to prove them all wrong. So here you are, wildly successful, like that pastor, a friend of mine, not wildly successful, but really good at what he did. But you don't have any sense of freedom in that. You still kind of think you're a jerk, and you act like a jerk to the people around you, because it's never enough, and that's who you are. That's who you think you are. But mostly, and I'll wrap it up with this, we need to marvel at the power of the tongue, a word, not to wound. We know about that, but to heal. The power of a word, not to curse. We know about that, but to bless. The power of a word, not to just tear down, but to build up and to affirm. Hebrews 11 is kind of known as the Hall of Fame of faith in the Bible. Moses, by faith, led the people out of Egypt. Sarah, by faith, conceived a child when she was past her age of conceiving. Noah, by faith, built an ark. They did something big, but Isaac and Jacob in Hebrews 11 are in the Hall of Fame of faith for no other reason than that they blessed their sons. It says in verse 28, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. And by faith, Jacob, as he was dying, blessed the sons of Joseph. Think about that. It's in that book I wrote about gasping for breath. That I'm not going to unpack it as I did there. But that with his dying breath, his last breath, he breathed life into the next. He blessed the sons of Joseph. And that's a life-giving thing. It all began in the beginning. This is what I ran in both. I love this. It all began in the beginning with this breath. It was the breath of God. It was the breath of life, the ruach. It was the spirit of God. And when God breathed into the nostrils of his creation, the breath of life, man, woman became a living soul. And but God kept coming with his breath all through the story. I love it. Ezekiel 37 or 34, it's in there somewhere. The dry bones, and prophesied to the bones, and they started to come alive. And it says it from the four winds, the winds began to come. It was the breath of God. Pentecost, same thing, a mighty rushing wind. It was the breath of God. And Jacob, as he was dying with his last breath, this blessing thing has capacity to give life to the next. The very first mention of a blessing, in fact, when Isaac and Jacob were blessing, it was the Aaronic blessing, and that's in Numbers 6:24. Some of you are familiar, people in church often with this. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face, make his face to shine upon you and give you peace. In verse 27 of Numbers 6, however, God explains what he means by that, like what you're doing when you do that, that with those words, you're invoking the name of God. May the Lord bless you, keep you, make his face. You're invoking the name of God on them. Literally, you're putting the name of God on them, name of God on you, name of God on you, God's name on you. God bless you. And first preached this, I remember we did a survey of some sort, and we found out we had more teachers going to Open Door than any other profession. And I thought of teachers. I said, we can't pray in school. It's against the law. Baloney. You can't bring it. Oh, yeah. No, and it was fun to kind of give everybody an experiment. Tomorrow, next 2 weeks, the most difficult kid in your class, don't even say it out loud. Name of God on you. Bless you. Name of God on you. It's just words. Who cares? Matters. What if it mattered? What if it mattered? What if who knows where that would go? I just think that's anyway, I'm overdoing it. No, I'm not. Ron Rolheiser says the significance of the blessing, the word blessing, is most noticed when it's absent, like when you didn't get it. Sometimes when you got it, you just you don't know why you don't struggle with that or whatever. It's most noticeable when you don't get it. And his take on blessing is not so much the name of God on you, though I think you should hang on to that one. But to bless means to see, to be seen, and then to say what you see. And by the way, this is always in the archetypal language Rolheiser uses, it's almost always an older person to a younger person. And when you see something, don't make things up, but when you see it, you say it, and that's a blessing. And so sometimes well, how can I bless you? You think of a ceremony where I know bless you in the name of the Father. That's fine, but this kind of thing can happen all the time. When you see it, you say it. The baptism of Jesus he got the blessing of the Father. Remember that? This has to do with identity. And the Spirit descended like a dove, and with a loud voice, the Father said, "This is my beloved Son. This is my beloved." That was his name. So that's his identity. This is my beloved, in whom I am well pleased. On him my favor rests. And my favor rests on him on good days and on bad, on happy days and on sad, on running well days and on stumbling days too. This is my beloved. That's who he is. Just words. Just words. I've told this story before of my dad. 10 years old, maybe 11. We were going to pick up the car at the gas station where they fixed it, and I had to go in the back, remember? And nobody was allowed in the back unless you were a mechanic, which meant that's what gave you a right to be back there, because you're a mechanic, or you own the place, or you own the car. So my dad could go back there, but I'm 10, I can't go back there. But I did. I was just following my dad. And immediately I felt intimidated, and all these eyes were on me like, "What are you doing here, kid? You don't belong here." The answer was no, kind of, in my spirit. And my dad put his hands on my shoulders and said, "George, this here's my boy. This is he didn't say beloved son." And it wasn't just, he just put his hands on my shoulders and said, "This is my boy." And all of a sudden I belong because of who I was. I didn't do one thing to deserve being in that space. And that's what's significant about the blessing of Jesus. But here's the question, and I'll try to wrap it up with this. When I'm talking about the significance of having heard these kinds of words from the Father or a father or mother figure kind of person, what if you didn't get it? And so you're screwed. That's the end of the story. I love the fact that the stories in the Bible are so human and real, because David didn't get that kind. He didn't, especially if Rolheiser is right about a blessing being when you see, because David's father Jesse didn't see him. I think we talked about this in a previous episode even. When Samuel came to say, "One of your sons is a king," he brought all his sons, but he didn't bring David. And Samuel said, "There's another one here." But the point is, he had a father who didn't see him, but someone did see him. Samuel saw him. And I would love to unpack this more, but I'll throw the question out. So who's your Samuel? Because some of us didn't get the words we were hoping to get from our father and our mother or whoever we had actually a right to expect them from, but you maybe have Samuel. So who are they? And they need to count. Whoever they are, maybe need to do some work around that to identify who those voices have been along the way, who saw something in you and said it and called it out. That's called a blessing.
Yeah.
Just words, just nothing. Just something. And the last thing was not only identify your Samuel, but we need Samuels more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Your neighbor kids, not just for your kids, but for your neighbor kids. We need Samuel. That's actually the feminine parallel to Samuel in my mind is Elizabeth. Remember when Mary was troubled by the news she got from God about being pregnant? She didn't go to her mother. I don't know that. I don't want to infer there was something wrong there, but she ran straight for Elizabeth, who was her Samuel kind of person, who saw what God was doing and saw it and said it. So I would say identify your Samuel. Wonder what it means for you to be a Samuel. One of my I talk about this on these pastor retreats I do. Paul's great lament in 1 Corinthians 4 is we have many teachers, many celebrity pastors even, who build big organizations. We have not many fathers. And we don't need any more celebrities. We need fathers and mothers. We need Samuels and Elizabeths. Last story, another one I know I've told in another episode, but they're all running together. So I was sophomore in high school. We were going to school. A train was going by, so we had to just sit there. I'm staring out the window. My dad's sitting next to me. He's driving, and he said randomly, "David, you make my heart glad." That's what I did. Nothing. I just stared out the window. He had no idea what I felt. I was exploding. In fact, those words to me were so significant. I'm talking about them now. I'm 70 now. I was 16 then. I still remember those words, but I looked like they didn't matter. So that's what I say to the people who, I'd like to be a Samuel and say what I see, but just get ready to be ignored. But don't yeah. Right? That doesn't mean you're just my mom, whatever. Don't shucks that. Marvel at the power of a word to set in motion the course of a life, to move it, not solve all their problems, but move it in a direction, to tell someone who they are and what they're worth. Marvel at the power of a word to breathe life into the next. And with his last breath, Jacob blessed the sons of Joseph. There's a legacy, I think. Anyway, I hope I'm not too grumpy to do it.
I mean, that's why we're recording you now, right? Like,
yeah,
like you might be too grumpy then, but we'll just watch video.
Yeah, try to play this. Yeah, he used to be a nice guy.
It was really fun during this episode, and I'd love for people to tell us if they were doing something similar. But the whole time you're talking, I'm reliving and thinking of people that have, in either a significant way or insignificant way, done that, blessed me, said something, done something for me that shifted the trajectory or were remarkable to me. And I think most of the time they probably had no idea.
Yep.
Right? Like
yep.
You just kind of have no idea. You go, yeah.
You were staring out the window, right.
Situations often that were like kind of in passing and weren't always someone that I was in a significant role in my life. Some of them, yes, but some of them, they had really no idea the significance that they had. And some of it's just timing too. Like we don't understand. We're going about our lives busy as ever, and we don't even understand the significance of our encounters with people, whether it's the neighbor kids or our own children or the lady at the grocery store, right?
Yep.
So you don't have to be in a significant role to have significant effect on someone. And again, I'm now like playing out these situations in my life where that has been absolutely true. The other thing that became so convicting to me about, let's see, okay, so my oldest is 16, which is, I can't believe it. But so it was about 10 years ago, and both Davis and Kirsten were taking cold lunch every day. Packing 2 lunches every day for a picky 6-year-old and a picky 5-year-old is like not my idea of a good time. And I became really grumpy about it, which is fine. Like, who really cares, right? But there was a significant time I was in the kitchen in our old house, and I remember, I don't know if it was God saying this to me or something, but realizing that this is maybe one of the most significant things that I do every day. And the only reason I know that is because if you remove that from their life, if you don't have someone who's willing to make a lunch for you, could they have packed it themselves? Sure. But I felt like this is like what God has for me. This is my job.
Yeah.
And you remove that from their life, and that profoundly affects a child's thoughts about themselves, their nutrition, I bet all these important emails I'm sending at work suddenly become really insignificant.
Yeah. Well, Annika, you get it. I mean, it fits right into, that's just a word. It's just who cares? Yeah. So, yeah. It's a big deal.
Yeah. It is a big deal. It is a big deal. And I think even bigger
Oh,
than that
yeah.
is, Go
Okay,
ahead.
you go. No, you go. No,
Ooh,
you.
the dog. No, you. We're so good at this.
Yeah, no, slick.
I don't even know what I was going to say now. You go.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Well, the thing about the small, the it's just the word. That's the whole thing of James, and that's why I love the Bible. When you stumble these things, the analogy of tongue. The whole point is that it's tiny. It's so the word, the rudder, what the bit in the horse's mouth. It's just and it applies all over the place. But ultimately, it has effect on who we think we are. It can be that big and get embedded, and so it's one of those. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. It can go either way. Anyway, so.
Yeah. Well, this was, again, really fun. And I guess it's my idea of a good time is talking about this. So I hope it's other people's too.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your insight around
Yeah.
identity and even the healing that is available to us through the words that God wants to share with us. Sounds like we're going to move on from this topic of identity. I'm not sure what's next, but I'm excited. I think so.
Yep.
I mean,
I think
hang
we're gonna
around
move.
for episode 13.
Yep. I think we're going to move from understanding who we are into why we're here. And remember the three things that we forget: who God is, who we are, and then why we're here. So I think we've been on a mission. Yeah.
All right. Well, till then, Dave, you can come back to Minnesota like anytime. It's freezing here, but
2 days. I know we're coming back in 2 days.
okay. Well, I will see you soon then.
Yep.
Bye,
Love
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.